Howdy, with this video, I want to go over the class schedule real quickly and then get you started on response number 2 and give you some background information so you kind of understand where we're headed. For the schedule, I'm doing this video on Wednesday, January 17th. For tomorrow night, you should be turning in response number 1, the syllabus quiz. That's due by midnight. Again, I'm not up at midnight, so if you're a late night person and you turn in at 2 in the morning, I'll never know the difference. I'm not going to have the Dropbox close at midnight or something goofy like that. Because some people are night owls, and you can kind of see it as students submit the material, who's turning things in at 3 in the morning or whenever. But that's due tomorrow night. Then for Monday, response number 2 is due. That's where we're going to start getting into the readings. Again, Comp 2 is writing about literature. And we're going to start getting this question of what is literature, who decides, how's all that kind of figured out. And it's kind of an interesting discussion there. Excuse me. And for response number 2, you got to read the excerpts from William Bradford, Abraham Williams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. And then you'll go to response number 2 and complete that. And what we're going to be doing is putting these readings into historical context, philosophical context, kind of seeing why writers are writing about the things they are and why they're writing that way about the things they are. People don't write in isolation. There's generally all these ideas floating around that they're trying to deal with and figure out. And that's what we're going to see each of these groups trying to do. And that's eventually what essay number 1 is going to be about, as you talking about one of these movements we're going to be talking about and placing a piece of literature within that movement in various ways. All right, so to get to the readings, you got to go to the content page for the course. And you're going to come to readings and viewings. These first ones aren't in our textbook, so if you don't have the textbook, that's fine. But the first one's chapter 9 from On Plymouth Plantation with William Bradford, one of the original Puritans who came over. They didn't have a good plan. About half of them died that first winter because they landed in Massachusetts in November with not a lot of food and no way to grow any. So they had a very hard time. But you're going to see the Puritans trying to put this experience into a biblical context, seeing if how they fit into God's history and things like that. The Puritans are very educated. They're kind of Renaissance people. You kind of think of them as witch hanging crazy people sometimes. But they're very educated, very focused on reading. If you wanted to know God, you had to know the Bible, that Calvinistic idea. And so you had to know how to read. So they're very, very educated, knew how to read. They're students of history. And you're going to see that with William Bradford. So you might be kind of surprised how well written and well read these people are. Abraham Williams, kind of between the Puritans and the American Revolution, trying to figure out all this stuff. And he's working with some of these Enlightenment ideas that we're going to talk about. And kind of say, well, let's be careful with some of this. I'm liking some of these ideas, but I can't go in 100%. That's kind of where you're probably going to be with a lot of these moves. I recognize these ideas; they influence my life, but I can't agree with all of them. And you kind of got to parse out which ones you like and don't like. The next excerpt from part 2 of Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Basically, it'll tell us how to be the perfect human being. With maybe a little bit of satire in there. He knows it's not possible, but he says if you come up with a good plan and live logically and rationally, you can have the good life. And the Jefferson reading is just a Declaration of Independence. It's amazing how short a document it took to separate ties with England there. And once you read these, and hopefully it goes pretty quickly. Again, their excerpts are not like the entire autobiography of Benjamin Franklin or the entire book of Plymouth Plantation, just one short chapter there. You're going to go to the response paper assignments, and you'll go to response number 2. And I already got this opened up, so I'm just going to go to here. And what you're going to see is a short lecture. And it's kind of up to you. If you want to read the lecture first, then go read the readings, that's fine. But it's a short lecture on the American Enlightenment, also talking about historical and literary movements. And some of the limitations with doing this, how do we decide who's important and who's not, who gets put into the movement, who doesn't? It's kind of a very interesting question, and that's kind of where the lecture kind of starts. It's like we're kind of starting in the middle of the story with American literature, and also this question of what's American and what's literature is a very interesting discussion to get into. But we're going to start talking about the Enlightenment, and you'll get a short lecture. I like to use art, paintings, architecture to demonstrate what's going on there. But fairly short lecture. May not feel short when you're reading, but it's pretty short. I try to keep it short. Because the goal of the class isn't for you to understand every little aspect of every little movement, but to kind of get a sense of what's going on, why these people are writing the way they are, and then see how the next movement's responding to the Romantics are going to respond to the Enlightenment folks. But anyway, once you get the readings read and the short lecture read, you're going to work on response number 2. You can see the guidelines. You need to should employ MLA formatting. I'm going to show you that here in a second. And you should quote at least once from, it should be at least 150 words, not counting quotes. I want you to quote at least once from one of the works and put it on a works citus page. I'll send an email out showing you how to do that. And you got to, generally it's a good idea to submit both as a Word and a PDF document, particularly if you like using pages or something like that. Sometimes it can get reformatted when you convert it to Word. Same thing with Google Docs. Sometimes weird things happen as you convert it. But do not send me a Pages document. I'll just send it back saying I can't open it. So you need to make sure you can export it as a Word document or a PDF document. And the PDF document kind of takes a picture of your response paper, so I can see how you originally formatted it. But the Word document is the most important one. That's the one I'm going to grade. But you're going to go through these questions. Hopefully one of these writers kind of strike you, and you don't have to answer all these questions. You don't have to address every question within one of the prompts. You're trying to show me you read the work, thought about it, maybe kind of make a reference to the lecture notes and get to 150 words. English counts, but it may not be perfect. We're writing pretty quickly, so a couple of errors isn't the end of the world. Don't try and write the greatest response paper in the history of ever. Please don't do that. We're dealing with a lot of questions here. Scholars argue about this all the time. It's not like I'm looking for the perfect answer. It's not a math question, right? But I do want you to show me you've read the work, thought about the prompt, and maybe the lecture notes, and get to 150 words. You can go over 150 words, don't go under. But try not to go too far over because you're not getting extra credit or anything. You're just doing extra work. But if you're kind of in a line of thought and you want to finish it, go ahead. Don't let me slow you down there. And then you'll submit that into the assignments Dropbox folder. If you want to see a sample response, you can go to the Help Resources area. And you'll see a sample response paper there. And that's how you want to format it. You want your last name, page number, and a header. Then your name, my name, class and section number, the date. You want a center title. Don't have to get fancy with the title for the responses. Everything should be double spaced once. And then you're just going to, again, address whatever the prompt is. The sample one shows you how to do short quotes. This is right here. And the quote marks, then a long quote, 5 or more lines which are offset. Hopefully you remember this from Comp 1. If not, you might want to kind of read the commentary in the margins. Like I said, in an email, I'll tell you how to do the works citus page for these first readings. This is kind of if you actually have the textbook. And of course, these readings aren't in the textbook anyway. But there is that sample essay to help you out. And of course, you're going to ask questions if you have any. If you want to, maybe pause the video right now, kind of, because I want to talk about one more thing for about 5-6 minutes. So if you're going to pause, like I said, now's a good time to pause. And that's a good thing about YouTube videos. If I'm overwhelming you a bit, just hit pause and walk off. Go do something for a little bit, come back and finish it. But moving on kind of to a different topic. And the topic we're going to move on to is, there we go, sorry. We're going to be working with 2 major philosophical questions as we go through the essay. This isn't a philosophy class. It's not a history class either, but examining the literature through history and philosophy can gain some pretty good insights to why the writers are writing the way they are. There's 2 philosophical questions, and these are good questions for the final exam. Centered on two different ideas. The first one is whether you're an essentialist or an anti-essentialist. An essentialist believes in truth. We can learn truth, live by truth, and our lives will be better for living by the truth. So if you're an essentialist, you probably believe in concrete reality. you probably believe in knowledge. You can gain this knowledge and live by it and have a good life. An essentialist is going to believe in moral absolutes. Because if you can discern truth and live your life by it, then that includes the moral area of our lives, right? An anti-essentialist is going to believe that things are a little more relative, that instead of reality, there's just perception, and each person's perception is a little bit different from the next. So what really is reality, except just kind of agreed upon hallucination, maybe? Instead of knowledge, instead of coming to college to get more knowledge, maybe you're just getting indoctrinated. Maybe you're just learning different professors' biases, and they're not really teaching you anything concrete, but just kind of their perceptions of what their subject matter is dealing with. It can be kind of interesting in something like history or literature, even. Why is my interpretation better than anybody else's? Just because I went to school and got indoctrinated a certain way. An anti-essentialist is going to start looking at something like the Ten Commandments or something, or moral absolutes, and kind of start saying, maybe it kind of depends more on the context, right? If my children are starving, is it okay for me to steal? And you kind of get into these interesting questions, and our authors are going to push us into some of these very interesting areas. So an essentialist, when they look at something like history or journalism, they're going to think, these are the facts. You can't argue with the facts. And this is just the way it is. An anti-essentialist is going to say, well, wait a minute. History seems to be more about his story. You kind of see a modern history professor say this once in a while. Is it just his story? Or what about women? What about other people who've been marginalized throughout the telling of history? What were they doing? That's kind of what the 1619 Project is, right? It's a re-examination of history through the African-American experience. It makes for a very interesting study. But of course, classic historians are like, well, no, wait a minute. You can't throw out the history to do this history. And they're saying, well, yeah, sure we can. Is journalism a reporting of facts, or is it just a creation of narratives? Donald Trump's gotten a lot of mileage out of this fake news idea, right? Where news is just this biased information designed to create a narrative, not really tell truth. So you can kind of see it. There's a lot of battles within our culture with these two ideas kind of banging heads with each other. It kind of the old, if we want to put God back in the schools, an anti-essentialist is going to start saying, well, which version of God, whose version of God, who gets to put God back in the school, who's going to teach that? It's all just going to be about bias and indoctrination into a certain religion. We can't do that. And you're not really preaching morality. It's just you're just going down a deep dark hole where an essentialist is going like, well, no, we believe truth exists and we should teach the religious aspect in school. Sorry, I keep hitting my computer here. But even if you believe in truth, you still got a lot of work to do. Where does that truth come from? You're going to see this with the first few response papers. Our authors are kind of trying to figure out where truth comes from. Does it come from a deity, a God? If so, how does that truth come down to us? Is it through just interpersonal interpretation of what God's trying to tell us to do? Do you feel it happening with inside you? Is there this voice inside you that's God speaking to you? We're going to get to that with the Romantics. Does it come through the Bible, like the Puritans believed? And to know God, you had to know the Bible. Or does it come through the Quran? Because there's different books about truth out there, right? So which one's the right one? Even if you believe that it was coming from God through a book, who gets to interpret that truth? How's it applied in our lives? Because we do kind of pick and choose. When we have a religious text, we kind of pick and choose what we want to do there sometimes. So lots of interesting. Why are people interpreting truth a certain way? Does it maintain a certain power structure? All kinds of fascinating questions about truth, and our writers are going to start poking at that quite a bit. You see Franklin sometimes poking at religious folks, kind of saying, "Is that really what you're doing? Are you really making us better people? What's going on there?" So lots of interesting ideas, and that's kind of what our author's going to get into. So sometimes you're feeling a little like, I don't like this, or this pushed me in an odd direction. That's kind of, they're probably playing with these ideas and pushing you and pulling you and tugging you a little bit. The other big philosophical question we're going to be working with throughout the semester is this question of whether or not we have free will, or that deterministic influences kind of create our lives for us. If you believe in free will, you believe you make your choices, and your choices determine your life. If you make good choices, you have a good life. If you make bad choices, maybe you don't have such a good life. And a determinist is going to say it's not really that simple. Our free will is often limited or modified by all these forces beyond our control, always working in conjunction to just crush the individual. Right? If you ever met me in person, you'd recognize right away I'm probably not a professional basketball player. I'm short. I'm not particularly coordinated with the basketball. I wear bifocals. It's just not my game. And it's not really my fault. My parents are kind of short. I'm kind of short. I just inherited these traits. I didn't choose to be short. It's just it's just the genetic code I've been given, and I have to live with it, and within those limitations. How much money a person has limits what they can do in life. I'm a mid-level government worker. My kids are probably not going to an Ivy League school, right? We just don't have the money for that. They can go to wherever they can get a scholarship, or wherever they take Tennessee Promise. The amount of money I make affects the future my children have. So they can't really make the choices, just an open choice about anything, really, right? If you're born a certain race or a certain gender, does our culture have certain expectations of you, or does it treat you differently in some ways? And how does all that work out? In terms of biology, who you're attracted to may not be something you choose, or it might be limited by all these different factors. A Kardashian's not going to be interested in a 60-year-old English teacher, right? That's just biology at work, and it's not my fault. I can't choose to make myself attractive to Kardashian. I'm just not in that area, right? Likewise, I'm not choosing to get old. I'm not choosing to have my hair fall out. Biology has a major deterministic influence in our lives. If you don't eat for 3 days, you're not going to think about this wonderful philosophical conversation. You're going to be thinking about food, right? Your body has needs. You have to meet those before you can do other things. If you're not getting those basic needs, you're probably not choosing to do much else. The environment you live in, the culture you live in, lots of modern research on what happens with childhood trauma and how that just stays with us for our entire lives. It's not our choice. We didn't choose to be traumatized as children. We can maybe choose how we deal with it, but it's always going to be there. We can't choose not to have it there. So it's kind of a very interesting question. How much choice do you really have in life? How much of it's limited, modified? And our authors are certainly going to be playing with this quite a bit, particularly more modern writers looking into some of these ideas. So again, if some of these writings make you feel uncomfortable, or you're like, I don't like that, then they're probably pulling and tugging on the way you think about things, and maybe trying to pull you in a certain direction. You don't have to go there, right? You can read something and not buy into it. But these two big ideas are going to be something we're going to be talking about throughout the semester. The idea is not to find the one perfect answer to all this. We've been arguing about this stuff for 3,000 years, and we're going to keep arguing about it as long as we're here. So don't feel like it's a math problem where essentialism versus anti-essentialism equals X or something, right? It's we're all kind of trying to work all this stuff out and figure it out, and maybe knowing we may not come up with the perfect answer. But sometimes we'll start referencing some of these ideas, particularly within the response paper prompts. And again, that's a good final exam question. Examine 2 or 3 works we've read this semester in terms of essentialism versus anti-essentialism, or through choice versus determinism. All right, so it's a lot there. Like I said, all you gotta do is read 4 short excerpts, complete the 150-word response. Don't overthink it. It's not going to be a philosophy class throughout every single day. But kind of have these questions somewhere in the back of your head, thinking like, oh, okay, I can see how that's coming into play here. I see how that's working out. But I think that's about it. That's enough. Again, I'm going to try to make the videos a little bit shorter. It's kind of a lot to just get everybody started and rolling in the right direction. But if you have questions as you start working on response number 2, and hopefully the responses get easier as you do more of them. But again, don't try to overachieve 150 words. Don't try and write me a 5,000 word treatise on the Declaration of Independence. Just show me you've read it and thought about it. And you can argue it, with our authors too, right? You don't have to agree with them. But I'm going to hush up here. If you have any questions, I assume you're going to ask me. That's the key, again, the key to a good internet class is students asking questions when they don't understand things. But other than that, we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.